Vicky Derderian is a would-be heart transplant patient who's ultimately been denied that transplant that she could have received, and the reason for that is related to her refusal to be vaccinated against COVID-19. As a result of this, Vicky has been the subject of understandably sympathetic coverage from not only the remaining figureheads of the freedom movement, but also the mainstream media. Firstly, I'm going to step back and simply let some of that coverage do the talking so that you can understand what the popular line has been around Vicky.
That's the situation facing Melbourne mother of two, Vicky Derderian. In 2020, Vicky's heart failed, and ever since she's been living with a VAD, a battery-operated life support device that mechanically pumps blood around her body. And what Vicky needs is a heart transplant, but she can't get her name on the list because of COVID vaccine mandates, even though she has a legal exemption from the jab.
Vicky is a mother of two children under the age of 18. She is a everyday, regular Australian mum, and her children need her, and Australia needs her. The hospital have decided to put her in the same category as alcoholics and drug abusers, basically saying that she does not deserve a heart transplant.
Really is just so cruel, and you would think we have moved well past that level of COVID hysteria.
So we're here now. I just want to thank Vicky for giving us the opportunity to speak to her at her home. I'm looking forward to having a chat to her to get an update as to what's been going on, and I hope to God that the Alfred Hospitals comes to their senses and does something to help Vicky. G'day, Vicky.
Hello. I've got a very, very, very special guest here today. She's a little bit camera shy, the one and only Vicky Derderian. Hey, Vicky.
Hello. Having a heart go to a person who's not vaccinated for COVID is obviously a heart wasted, they think.
Did they say that?
Yes.
They said it's a heart.
Yeah, it's a heart wasted, and that
they give it to you.
And they're not doing due diligence to the donor family.
She has a legitimate vaccination exemption, but the Alfred Hospital is choosing not to approve it.
The exemption was given by ATAGI.
ATAGI?
Yes.
ATAGI themselves have given you the exemption which the hospital will not recognise, a legal exemption from ATAGI.
No, they won't recognise it.
Now, the Alfred Hospital is the only hospital in Victoria that does heart transplants. So guess what we are going to do? We are going to cause a lot of pressure.
So as we can see, all the scraps of the freedom movement have rallied around Vicky by doing content and even, of course, rallies.
Heart for Vicky! Heart for Vicky!
Vicky recruited the assistance of one Serene Tefaha, who is an ex-lawyer, really. She became deeply pilled and fried over COVID and ultimately had her legal practicing licence cancelled due to some of her conduct over the course of the pandemic and through the anti-lockdown movement. That being said, Serene can still represent someone at a body like, say, VCAT, the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal, and that's exactly what Vicky needed. Vicky took the Alfred to VCAT for their decision to refuse her a heart transplant, and Serene represented her.
So you recently went to the tribunal to try and have this overturned. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? What happened?
Yeah. It's David and Goliath.
Do you feel like you got a fair hearing at VCAT, or was it all stacked against you?
No, I don't think I've had a fair hearing.
And so that is the story on Vicky. As you can see, she has become, by virtue of her anti-vaxxer stance, a content cow for the remaining influencers who are still buzzing around the carcass of what we used to call the freedom movement. Still, Vicky is in need of a heart and she is literally dying. So regardless of whether she's an anti-vaxxer and what I think about that, or how deluded or badly informed or stubborn she is, she's definitely in great mortal danger. And in this house, we definitely feel a great sympathy and understanding for her plight, if not her position. And in fact, that's why I think it's worth it to understand what really went on here. To that end, I've been discussing Vicky's situation with the excellent and impeccably informed Vaxatious Litigant, with whom I'm proud to have collaborated on this video. They provide excellent and thoughtful discussion of the remnants of the freedom movement's goings on, in particular from a very legally informed perspective. So in collaboration with them, we have some thoughts on Vicky's account of events. In order to discuss them, let's go back bit by bit through Senator Ralph Babette's video in which he went to her house to interview her.
Having a heart go to a person who's not vaccinated for COVID is obviously a heart wasted, they think.
Did they say that?
Yes.
Okay, now, the Alfred did not say that giving a heart to an unvaccinated person was heart wasted. One of the hospital's expert witnesses gave evidence about the benefits of vaccination and how it reduces the risk of dying. The reason that Vicky was not accepted due to her refusal to accept the vaccine is because she is greatly immunocompromised and will be more so if she becomes a heart transplant recipient. Even the mildest illnesses that you or I would pass off as a sniffle or a head cold could kill a transplant recipient. Without vaccination, you are simply too endangered by even the most mild of illnesses, let alone COVID-19. Dr. Nick Coatsworth essentially discussed around this and the value of a heart transplant directly with Vicky in what I thought was a very thoughtful exchange. Far too thoughtful, in fact, for the thoroughly dumb setting of a Today Show discussion, but that's where they had it.
The other thing that's sacred, of course, Vicky, is the sacred donation of the organ by the organ donor and their family. And from a transplant physician's point of view, and I'm an infectious disease physician, I've looked after lots of people with transplants. I've had friends and patients of mine die of infectious complications after transplant, and COVID-19 is one of those complications. I agree with you when we talk about risk, but from the transplant physician's point of view, the biggest risk to you is when we hit your immune system like that. If you get COVID-19 without having the vaccine, then there's a really significant risk that you'll die, and that organ will die with you. And we don't want that to happen to you, and we certainly don't want it to happen to the family who's made that sacred donation. So it's such a complex area. I don't envy your decision, but I do stand by the rules that the transplant physicians have made here.
The exemption was given by ATAGI.
ATAGI.
Yes.
ATAGI themselves have given you the exemption which the hospital will not recognise, a legal exemption from ATAGI.
No, they won't recognise it.
Vicky, despite all the coverage of her saying that she did, she does not have a medical exemption from ATAGI. ATAGI don't give medical exemptions. The Australian Immunisation Register don't give them either. ATAGI set the guidelines for doctors to follow to determine if a patient qualifies for an exemption. Now, Vicky's local GP might well have issued her with some sort of an exemption on letterhead, sure.
ATAGI gave you an exemption from taking the mRNA injection, which the hospital is not recognising.
When I spoke with my GP said, Vicky, she said, I don't recommend that you should have these vaccines. And also, obviously, she'd read my history because, you know, GPs get copy of discharge report sent to them. And she said, look, I will do my best to help you. But she said, at the end of the day, it's not my decision.
But doctors at the Alfred responsible for Vicky's heart issues determined that she was eligible for the COVID vaccine. And they recommended that she take Novavax. You remember Novavax, right? It is not an mRNA vaccine, but it is a COVID-19 vaccine. So if mRNA vaccines were really Vicky's only issue, as she said, rather than all vaccines since she started listening to anti-vaxxers, then she would already by now have had her jab and presumably, if all things went well, have already had her transplant too by now. She knows all this, but she does cut it out of the story that she tells publicly, so...
No, I don't think I've had a fair hearing. I was made out to be a anti-vaxxer.
Okay, so there's that line. I was made out to be an anti-vaxxer. She wasn't made out to be an anti-vaxxer. She is an anti-vaxxer, and that's how she came across by her own evidence. and by her own testimony. I mean, all this provisionally approved, experimental, died suddenly shit, it's classic anti-vaxxer discourse. She's not just against mRNA vaccines because she also refused a non-mRNA vaccine. She might have had plenty of vaccines previously in her life, sure, but I suspect that was before she became red pilled by COVID-era anti-vaxxer influencers.
Now let's get this clear. You've had all your vaccinations?
I've had all my vaccinations.
Except for the mRNA injection?
Except for the mRNA injections, which I had grave concerns about.
This is a flat-out lie. During VCAT hearings, we also heard that she hadn't had the flu shot either. Remember, the flu is another virus that could probably get passed off by you or I, but which would kill Vicky.
We feel like we're in no man's land at the moment.
So basically, you're not getting any help from the government, you're not getting any help from the Alfred, everyone's just kind of cast you out.
Pretty much.
This is another lie, a fortunate lie really, because it's good to know that Alfred have not cast her out. They've been looking after Vicky. She continues to receive their expert care.
It was, our witnesses were cross-examined very, very harshly, even to a point where they were asked, are you vaccinated?
So they basically tried to treat you like a criminal and your witnesses like you were criminals.
Yeah. Cross-examined very harshly. That's the point of cross-examination, really. But I think it bears mentioning that Vicky's witnesses here were a suspended doctor, suspended due to his willingness to peddle vaccine-related misinformation, no less, and a bookkeeper and a statistician. I mean, it's well and good, if you ask me, that these hacks were thoroughly cross-examined. I'm sure you'll agree.
They probed into their personal, political beliefs, personal beliefs about vaccination, which we thought was completely unnecessary. We tried to intervene, but the judge just didn't want to have a bar. She just wanted to continue.
Alfred's legal counsel probed into Vicky's witness history for the purpose of convincing the VCAT member that the witnesses were not independent, because expert witnesses are supposed to be independent. They're not advocates for any one side or the other. As experts, their role is supposed to be to help the tribunal come to a decision, not to advocate for the individual who hired them. Note here that Vicky is clearly parroting whatever nonsense Serene has fed her about VCAT's treatment of the expert witnesses.
Hear me? Is that better? All right, good afternoon everyone. This is Serene Tefaha from CoVision. We're outside the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal for the closing submissions of Vicky Jackassian and the Alfred. I think the closing went really well. I put very, very strong arguments forward. They rebutted them with the usual implications about, the expert witnesses not being independent and so forth. But the quality and calibre of our evidence speaks for itself, and we'll now wait and see what happens. Thank you.
Serene began to sense that this was not working out for her and Vicky, and she basically asked them if she could find out in advance if Vicky might lose, and if so, could they just quietly withdraw beforehand, please? I suspect, really, that, Serene just didn't want to chalk up a loss on the board for the anti-vax cause, her real priority here, not Vicky, by having it shot down in this hearing. You get the impression over multiple fronts that it was Serene Tefaha who was on show here, and the anti-vax cause, not Vicky and her life and her circumstances. Essentially just Serene bringing Vicky along for the ride because of her useful story. Case in point, in this Vaxatious Litigant observation of her hearing, Vicky says she'd never sue a hospital. And the tribunal's response to her is that she's literally there to do that. So you have to wonder, how much was Serene actually bringing Vicky up on this process? How much was she really explaining to her what she was doing? As opposed to just sensing that her story was, gold and leading her up the garden path to see what kind of utility her situation could have in the VCAT setting. Earlier, Serene had said she'd be taking this all the way to the High Court. And you sense a certain giddiness, Not just here, I get this a lot. You know, that this story they found is an ace in the hole for the anti-vax cause. Like, yes, we found our media darling, you know, let's take this one up to the top. It's very opportunistic. Furthermore, after the hearing, when Serene published her own media statement praising how much of an exceptional job, quote unquote, her quote, she did. Vaxatious Litigant's thoughts on Serena, I asked them for them, and they responded, in my opinion, Serene wanted to fight against the corrupt cabal and leveraged Vicky's situation for that fight. Of course, Serene doesn't see it that way. And to be fair, I don't think Serene realises that she used Vicky. Not that that's an excuse by any means, but I think Serene genuinely believes she has Vicky's best interest at heart. But this is all moot because in the end, just recently, in fact, last week, Vicky wound up withdrawing her case from VCAT. The saddest bit for me is that in the closing hours of these meetings on May the 9th, it came out that Vicky was in fact no longer eligible for a heart transplant. Why? Because while all this pissing about and fundraising and social media posting and rallying and not simply taking the fucking Novavax and making videos with Ralph Pabet was going on, Vicky's heart issues eventually led to her kidneys and lungs failing as well. So now Vicky is not on the heart transplant list anymore. That's too late for her. She would need a block heart, kidney and lung transplant apparently. And that's a real shame if you're an influencer hoping to continue to use dying Vicky Derderian as an anti-vax content cow, because it fucks with the narrative, doesn't it? And how pesky of her. Now we can't continue to pretend that Vicky is merely the victim of a cruel hospital system who denied her treatment just because she didn't drink the Kool-Aid like all us sheep. Now we have to leave Vicky's story alone. We can't use it anymore. Right? No. Not if you're Ben Fordham. Because this is him. This is Ben Fordham on 2GB the day after the news came out about Vicky's ineligibility for the heart transplant, talking still about no jab, no heart.
The Alfred Hospital has rejected her request. She's been deemed ineligible to be placed on the organ donor waiting list. Why? Because she's not vaccinated against COVID. Vicky says, I think it's a form of punishment. They're set in their ways. Basically, it's no jab, no heart. Keep in mind, this week the World Health Organization declared coronavirus is no longer considered a global emergency. So why are we still punishing people who are unvaccinated? Patients know that there are risks associated with surgery. There's a mother of two who wants to see her kids grow up. And having a rule in place that says no jab, no heart transplant is ruthless. For God's sake, show some heart.
And I just think it's funny that the bloke who does sniggering curiosity pieces on cookers these days also occasionally has no qualms, it seems, parading the dying body of Vicky Derderian around to entertain a potential audience of anti-vaxxers when it suits him. It's almost as though Ben Fordham has no principles. Thank God for women like Vicky who are very ill or dying and in desperate need of genuine medical care. Thank God for them that they have some of the best minds and hands in the world available to them locally in the form of the geniuses at Alfred, which I understand from my layman's perspective to provide some of the best care in the world for people with heart problems like hers. Thank God. But devastatingly, some of that care is falling into the lap of people who've been tricked since 2020 by an army of lying grifters and con artists and cancelled ex-lawyers and opportunistic media germs to run away from it and refuse it. They despise and they fear and they mistrust the very thing that would save them, also that some asshole can sell a t-shirt or bumble into the Senate or get some subscriptions or whatever. You know, the last video I did touching on Cooker World was on the murder-suicide of a mother and daughter who'd been pilled to the gills by COVID denialist conspiracies. That's the kind of light entertainment I'm giving you these days about conspiracists on my fun, family-friendly channel. You know, I used to love talking about cookers. I'm the reason everyone calls them that. I used to approach conspiracists with excitement and curiosity. I did. But after 2 or 3 years of this shit, all I seem to notice now is the lonely, sad schmucks who are getting sick and dying for no reason, or killing themselves because of all the shit they believed online.
You know, we all have to go somehow. But sometimes I'd rather go with my head held up high, knowing that I did not succumb to tyranny.
Well done. Amen. That's what it's all about, Michael.
And what I hate is that when they're chewed up and spat out and rendered unusable, these influencers just fucking dump people like Vicky. And they pretend they never existed, and then they go off stalking through the hospital wards or the fucking graveyards looking for their next content cow. Vicky's not even the flavour of the month anymore. Now they're onto a 16-year-old girl called Dazelle who needs a lung transplant but won't take the COVID jabs that are a fucking prerequisite for receiving a transplant, because otherwise if you get COVID, it'll definitely kill you. Dazelle is a fresh sob story. So, hey, fuck Vicky off, I guess. She'll be dead soon. She's not even eligible anymore anyway, is she? So that doesn't play well before the media, before the cameras. Ben Fordham probably won't touch her again now. So let's just go with the lung kid. And what fucking wrecks me is that despite Vicky knowing that she needs a kidney and a heart and a lung, like a heart ain't just going to cut it anymore, despite that, she started her own second independent fundraiser for just a heart from somewhere overseas or something, as though that could possibly ever work. It couldn't possibly save her, but she's fundraising for it anyway, and I just find that unbearably sad, you know? It's like the thrill of a social media campaign is more important than an actual medical solution for the things that are killing them. And who do you think taught her that virality is more important than actual medical care, eh?
I still want to be around for my children. I want to be able to raise them the way that, you know, my children really need their mother, and they say that all the time. You know, you're the foundation of this family, Mum. You know, what would we do without you? So I know God hears that. You know, I just hope and pray every day that God puts conscience and mercy into the hearts of those people who are at the top making decisions, and for them to be able to have compassion.
But I'm not making this to sneer at a dying woman because of how stupid she is. That is not the point of this video. I'm making this as a place marker and a reminder that when Vicky dies, the blame will lie at the foot of the opportunists who first hooked her up to a drip feed of bullshit from 2020 onward, and then kept her on that drip feed without a care for her survival, even as her health failed. I know that we live in the digital Wild West, you know, it's just chaos. None of these monsters, because what else are they, will ever face any real consequences for what they've done here. I know. I'm not that naive. But I just hope that when she goes, not if, the memory of Vicky Derderian will rest a little heavily on some of these parasites' shoulders. That's enough for this little bit of light entertainment, everyone. Thank you so much to Vaxatious Litigant for all your hard work and for your help. Everyone, please give them a follow. If you want to support my work, patreon.com/Tom Tanuki. See you next time.